All right, Doug, good morning. Today, we want to talk about, well, there's several things we can talk about, but in the news is this eviction moratorium that's been extended by the CDC. And I think it's important to talk about for a whole bunch of reasons and what it might mean for the future. But first, what's your take on it? What's your original, your core idea that about it? What's your opinion?
Well, it goes back to this whole COVID hysteria to start with, and I do believe I hope this might be the thing that gets us deplatformed. But look, it really is a hysteria. I mean, it's been blown totally and absolutely out of proportion. And one of the things which is most disastrous is when they put a moratorium on the payment of mortgages and rent. And that's devastating individuals that have decided to build their wealth by buying a house or an apartment and renting it out to somebody else. They're out of luck. Is the government going to make it good for them? No, I don't think so.
Well, no, this the moratorium specifically, whether by the CDC, is one on evictions for renters. Like, so it does not absolve people of mortgage obligations. It doesn't even absolve the renters, in fact, of their rental payments. It just makes it so that they cannot be evicted for not paying it.
Well, the renters are not going to pay their back rent. It was a moratorium, not a forgiveness, but it's going to come out of somebody's pocket, which basically means the landlord's pocket. So there are a whole class of people that might lose their rental houses or rental apartments. That's what it boils down to. And the other thing is the renters have gotten into the custom of not paying rent, and they're not going to want to start and certainly not make good on the past rents. And they've been getting all these goodies from the government, from unemployment and using it to speculate on Robinhood, I guess, is what most of them have done, with 10 million new accounts opened in the last year. It's unprecedented.
It's amazing.
And, interestingly, here's a fun fact, a factet, not a factoid. A factoid is an artificial fact, but it's that 2.5% of adults had a brokerage account in 1929, and it was deemed a world-class mania. Today, I think the number is about 50%. It's gigantic.
Wow. So that's actually having a brokerage account, not just 401k retirement funds, but actually has a brokerage account.
Well, can I be absolutely sure of that? Because the quality of reporting everywhere is so substandard. It's like we were talking about before we went on the air, we were talking about the reporting for COVID cases. Well, what's a case? I guess you take a test and you have the virus in your body, but the tests are mostly inaccurate. And if you're asymptomatic, is it a difference that makes no difference? I mean, I don't have any good answers for that. And nobody's coming up with any good answers that I've seen.
You're right. Data is hard to get, but I do have a little data, at least an estimate from the New York Times about the number of households that are in arrears right now on their rents. Do you have any idea what those numbers are? I'm just wondering. I have it. I just want to see if you can guess range.
Well, let me see. I guess about 50% of Americans rent as opposed to are buying, approximately. And I'll guess that 10% of that 50% who are renters are in arrears. Wild guess.
Well, I think that's pretty close, because it's 6.2 million households are in arrears is what they show, which is a total of, actually they have this broken down. I don't see by the percentage across the board. I only see percentages by different locations, but actually the New York Times has a pretty good infographic on all this. And they could tell you, for instance, that there are, and there are nearly 300,000 renters in Los Angeles County alone that owe on average $5,300 each. They go down by different areas.
Well, they're never going to pay that back rent. That is not going to happen. So I guess those landlords are out of luck, aren't they?
It seems so. Now, there's two things that really bother me about this, or I think are interesting about what's happening right now with this. And the first is that we talked about this when the CDC first did this back in September, and it was Trump's CDC, by the way. You know, it was Trump's CDC, and it was all, but it seemed so, it was like, how could they possibly have the authorization to do it? It seemed insane that they could do it at that time, but it really didn't get the same kind of press that this one gets. And there's another reason for it, but I don't like this whole like idea that the Republicans and the Democrats are fundamentally opposed to, a certain set of actions is still, I don't know why people still don't get it. Like they're, Biden's administration is continuing the things from Trump. I mean, the vaccines were made under Trump, then they're pushed under Biden. I mean, like it's all the same. And I don't know why people don't see that. So one thing that drives me crazy. I'd certainly like to hear your thoughts on that. But the second thing, which I think is greater implications, is the Supreme Court ruling that came out in June related to this. So first of all, what do you say to people who still think that that if we just get the right guy in office, if we have a red team wins, we'll be fine? What do you say to people who are still holding out that sort of hope?
Well, I hate to say it because those are nice people that believe that. They're
Yeah.
hopeful.
Yep.
I've got to say they're delusional at this point. Look, even when we look at Trump, and you may or may not like his personal style, but the fact of the matter is the only thing that distinguishes his actions from anybody else's is that he's a cultural conservative. In other words, he'd like to kind of maintain basic American culture, but everything that he's done in the way of economics and monetary and so forth has been just ultra disastrous. But people still robotically support him. I guess most people don't understand economics, so they dismiss that for that reason. And the culture is the most important thing. But yeah, it's a pity. And of course, in Trump's defense, it's pretty obvious that he couldn't just sweep all these old people out of office. There are civil service rules that makes it very hard to get rid of people, and
Yep.
all kinds of God knows what kind of pressures there are. And I read the other day, and of course, I have to double fact check anything before I actually believe it. But apparently there are 10,500 employees of the CDC. That is a large number of employees for something that is supposed to monitor massive pandemics. But what are those 10,500 people doing if we don't get any credible information on this supposed pandemic? What are all those employees doing? Couldn't somebody appoint somebody else to actually dig into the facts?
Well,
there are any facts anymore.
and I think this speaks to the Republican Democrat thing, because I think that it's not just a Trump and Biden. I mean, those are the most recent figureheads, but they don't. I mean, you would think that the Congress, the Republican members of Congress, if they supposedly provide oversight for these organizations, but they seem uninterested, or unwilling, or whatever. I just don't think there's like their actions. I just think that this whole idea of these party politics, that one party, is going to make things better and the other party is going to make things bad, and that Americans get divided into two sides on this. It seems so on its face foolish now. It's like I even like to imagine that there was a difference before, but it seems so clear now that there's just no difference.
At least in the past, you could say that the Republicans were the warfare party and the Democrats were the welfare party, but they're both warfare and welfare parties at this point. And in the past, you could say that the Republicans say they believe in free markets, but economically, but they want social restrictions. And the Democrats want social freedom, but they don't believe in free markets. That's not true either. It's a difference in style between the two parties at this point. So, no, the situation is hopeless. And one of the big problems is that people actually are looking for political solutions.
Yeah.
And the only political solution that I can see upcoming is a political revolution. And revolutions are bloody and ugly, and then things get worse because the most brutal people take over after a political revolution. But I think the US is on the way to one. But that's the only kind of political change that we're actually going to see change, and it's not good. So sorry to be pessimistic again, but that's a recurring theme.
So let's talk about the Supreme Court ruling about the CDC thing. In June, the majority, the Supreme Court took a case related to this. They ruled very clearly that the CDC had overstepped its authority, had no legal authority whatsoever to initiate this moratorium on rents and evictions, but they chose not to force a removal of that moratorium immediately because it was set to expire. So they're like, no, it's totally illegal for you to do it, but we're not going to require the cancellation of it because it's going to expire anyway. And that was just in June. Okay, so now we are here. I guess we're at August, and they decide that it's fine. We're just going to go ahead and do the moratorium again, where the CDC is going to continue to extend this thing. What does that mean?
Well, I've said for years, the Constitution is a dead letter. It's selectively observed when it doesn't cost the powers to be anything, and everybody can feel good about the rule of law. But the people that are in control now have the psychological makeup of Jacobins or Bolsheviks. And now that they've got power under their control, and they're sure they know what to do, and they're sure that they're good and all of us are evil, this trend is in motion. And that's an excellent point. I mean, that's overthrowing, well, in the past, it's always been a tripartite government where the legislature and the executive and the judicial kind of balanced each other. They have a word for that, I think. But if they're disregarding what the Supreme Court says, well, that means they can do whatever they want with no restrictions at all. Forget about what the courts say.
Right. Exactly. And I think, and I think that one of the things that seems very clear from all this is that, and maybe a second order thing that people don't necessarily think about, is the fact that a department within the administration decided that at least 6.2 million contracts, private contracts between private parties in different states across the country, are null and void. They have the consequences of those contracts are totally irrelevant. And so what does that mean for property rights then? I mean, do you own anything if some bureaucrat can say, well, we're unilaterally changing the terms of those contracts? The courts say that's illegal, you can't do it, but still, the court doesn't have a standing army, I don't think, and nor would they be willing to use it. They weren't even willing to force the immediate cancellation of this illegal order from the CDC.
That's right. If you're outraged by something that the government is doing to you, the operative of the government, his answer would be, well, so sue me. Well, that's great. I mean, it costs an arm and a leg to sue. And it takes months to get into court. And once you get into court, it takes maybe years to get out of. And the only thing that you're certain of, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And even then, well, will they observe what the court rules then?
Right.
So this situation's gotten completely out of control. And I don't know how it can be turned backwards, because these people are getting more and more aggressive. I mean, lockdowns coming again, forcing everybody to have a vaccination. And if you don't, that's all right. No, you don't have to. You just can't fly. You just can't go to a restaurant. Maybe you can't enter or leave the country anymore if you want to, like in Australia, for instance. Mm-hmm. This is actually getting scary. And I say that not just as a matter of rhetoric, but a matter of actual reality.
Yeah, it is pretty frightening because, the rule of law, you just got, a lot of times you could always see these examples where there are great injustices in the law. But when you see the just utter disregard, and not even like the showing pretense, that like we're pretending that the law matters, we're just really going to go and do what we want to do because we're doing the right thing. It does really reek of the Bolsheviks in 1917.
Yeah, it does. And the next thing will be, if any of these cases come to trial, for all I know, we're going to wind up with show trials where the judge is either one of them or is so intimidated that he allows the prosecutor to run roughshod over him because he knows behind the scenes they're going to do bad things to him.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So let me ask you something that's related to housing, but it's more economic focused, I guess, is that, and I sent you this article from CNBC. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but it says that, let me actually find this really quick. It talked about household debt jumping by the most in 14 years to nearly 15 trillion in the second quarter. And that's a lot. But there's the most interesting part to me was that this is what it says. Over the last 4 quarters, mortgage originations have totaled close to 4.6 trillion, amounting to 44% of all outstanding home loan balances. So 44% of all home mortgages were originated in the last 12 months.
Well, that's interesting because most mortgages today, I assume, are fixed interest rate mortgages. So the banks are making loans at 2.5%, 3%. What happens when interest rates go back up? It means that all those banks are going to go bankrupt. The government can't have that happen. If the economy really does collapse, as I expect it to do, even at those low interest rates, a lot of people aren't going to be able to pay their mortgage, even at those low interest rates. This is going to be real chaos.
Do you think, that even just the magnitude of that is just massive when you figure and I'm just here too, but just like the rates haven't come down that much in the last year. So like why it wouldn't drive many people to refinance, I don't think. And because the rates have been really low for a while. Mortgage rates, have been low for, I wouldn't think there'd be I don't know how much of this is refinancing, of course, versus new loans, but the fact that almost half of all home loan balances were originated in the last 12 months seems shocking to me. I mean, it just seems unbelievable.
It actually is shocking. And of course, if it's true, and I guess it's true, could be true, this has a lot to do with the fact that houses have gone up across the board, something like 20-25% in the last year. And in some markets, much more than that, actually. Mm-hmm. So, well, listen, I'm part of the problem because I bought this house, I paid cash for it, and now I'm taking a loan out against it because I figure it's like free money. The only difference is that I'm not using the debt that I'm assuming to buy more cheap shit from China, more TVs or whatever stuff that people wind up putting in their storage units because their garages are already full of stuff.
Right.
So, we really are perhaps approaching a crack-up boom where people think they're wealthy because of all the free money, and they borrow more and they spend it like they don't owe it. Now, this is going to be fascinating to see what happens over the next year.
Let me tell you one other stat from this same article. It says in dollar terms, let's see, the fastest, household debt rose 313 billion. This is not mortgage loans. Like this is the household debt. So more consumer debt is factored into this too. So that rose 313 billion in the second quarter to nearly 15 trillion. In dollar terms, that was the fastest growth since the second quarter of 2007. So just the amount of new debt people are taking on is shocking.
Well, and apparently that doesn't count government debt, who are adding 180 billion, or is it 120 billion dollars per month of debt being sold to the Federal Reserve.
But Doug, this is when people are not paying rents.
I know.
This is when you haven't had to pay your student loans.
No, that's right, and that's another 1.6 trillion. You know, it's funny. A trillion is 1,000 billions. It's and it used to be. You remember there was this joke during the 50s. There was a senator from Illinois named Everett Dirksen, and everybody thought it was very funny when he said a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon it adds up to real money, and today a billion here, a billion there is absolutely just. It's not even a rounding error anymore.
No, nobody even thinks that's a lot of money. I mean, no. It's shocking. It's shocking. So it's there just seems to me to be so many crazy distortions in the economy with things like this that we talked about, the housing. I mean, there's also the fact that there was, huge shortage of inventory, huge price increases in housing, but then there's been in the last 3 months, the number of transactions has dropped tremendously since then, and now inventory levels of houses is actually, back up to levels not seen since the financial crisis. So it's weird how it's shifting so fast, like these whipsaws back and forth, these crazy distortions and everything.
Yeah, it is. Houses are unaffordable. Maybe people will start saying, "Wait a minute, cars." I mean, it's this is a very, very big deal, and we are in terra incognita as far as the U.S. is concerned at this point. And the fact that this is going on in the U.S. is so much more meaningful than if something like this goes on in Zimbabwe or Argentina. Those are isolated, nothing nowhere countries. And if they blow up internally, as they both have, it's tough for the people inside, but there's a lot of capital from around the world that comes in to buy the assets, puts new capital in the country by buying assets or investing or whatever like that. But if the US dollar blows up, which is what this is all focused around, it's the currency, well, who's going to bail out the US, which is the centerpiece of the world's financial system?
SDRs, I guess, maybe from the World Bank. I don't know.
Well,
IMF.
who knows? Do they have any more arrows in their quiver? I think that it's going to get bad enough that everybody's going to clamor for strong leadership to straighten things out and have a global reset because things are so bad. Everybody will figure, actually correctly, that we need a reset, except the reset is going to be the exact opposite kind of reset of what's needed.
Right. Well, it'd be sort of along the lines of what Klaus Schwab has been working toward, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, it's not. So basically the summary here, the rule of law is more in doubt than ever when the Supreme Court is directly violated by the administrative state, and most people seem to be fine with it. And the economy continues to show all kinds of distortions, whipsawing prices and debt levels. And I mean, savings was, like, for instance, super high last year. We talked, I mean, like American savings was like record high, and now household debt, record high growth. Like it's whipsawing. It's pretty crazy.
But still, at the moment, there aren't mobs in the street. And I went to a little restaurant in a little town here in the US the other day, and everything was orderly and mellow. I could get the food. The waitress was, it looked nice. It was awfully expensive for what we got. I was shocked. I don't see how the average person can afford what everything costs.
Yeah.
Don't understand a lot of things, but I think that's all going to change within the next year, and it's not going to be pleasant. So it's funny. People have asked me in the past, well, how bad do you think this Greater Depression is going to be? And tongue in cheek, I always said, it's going to be so bad, it's going to be worse than even I think it's going to be. And now I'm starting, you know what? I think I'm going to be right. And having said that,
It's yes, it's not a rhetorical quip. Instead,
No.
it's actually a failure of imagination for how bad it could be. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right.
All
Well, we
right.
didn't even talk about Freedom Fest, where we both were
Yeah.
uh, last last week, and I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I'm drinking coffee not out of my Sturgis mug, because while we went to Rapid City, I took the time of being a kind of a motorcycle aficionado, not as much as you are, because I don't currently have any bikes, but to drive to Sturgis, which is, or I guess this week actually, 500,000 wannabe outlaws are gathering. It's
Mostly
just a little
dentists.
town, a couple, 3,000 people, it's small.
Yep.
And so I don't know where they're going to put these. Well, they all camp out everywhere and that. But one of the most interesting things in the bar where I bought my Sturgis mug, it was it was a sign. It wasn't for sale. I would have bought it if it was for sale. It said, no colors, no weapons before you went to the bar. So there's a certain flavor and character to a lot of the people who go to Sturgis. So did Sturgis and Deadwood. I went to Deadwood, and of course I love playing poker, and played poker there 2 nights. And I'm a reasonably competent player. I won $300 the first night and $100 the second night. So that's okay. I mean, I couldn't make a living playing poker, at least at the stakes we were playing there. But it's always gratifying to win as opposed to lose. We went to Rushmore. Never been there before.
So what were your impressions? I told what were your
Only two of
impressions?
them were well chosen. Huh?
What were your impressions of it? Because I told you mine when I first saw it years ago when I saw it. But what were your impressions when you come around the corner and you see it?
Well, it's nice, and I'm sure it'll be there a lot longer than the United States of America is going to be here. I mean, I don't know what this country is going to transform into in 100 or 200 years, or in terms of geological time. But those things are built and carved out of granite, so they'll be there for quite some time. And we drove to the Crazy Horse Monument, which is transforming slowly and gradually, but it's going to be considerably larger than the president's. But I've got to make a comment about the choice of the presidents on that wall. And incidentally, in the area of Rushmore, there are lots of rocky promontories which could receive the face of other notables. And I disapprove of the fact that these people are political leaders, which is the first mistake. Washington, Jefferson, okay. Founding fathers, mythic past, all right, I understand that, that's fine. But then Lincoln, who, horrible president, we've talked about him before, has no right to be there. The fact that he preserved the government in Washington, D.C., well, that's a whole other discussion. Would the world and would the country be better off if we'd split into two countries then? Because there was a real cultural divide. And I'm not in favor of slavery, just in case some fool is thinking that. And then, of course, it's topped off by Teddy Roosevelt, who had, a lot of flair, great personality. I can't think of a president who'd be more fun to have a night of drinking and talking to than Teddy. But
Yep.
horrible president, disastrous president. What's he doing up there?
Yeah, he was a bad one for sure. But I think that so who should be up there instead of political leaders? And history seems to be written, or it's not always written this way. You can seek out lots of history books that are not based on political leaders, and I find those to be generally a lot more informative. That are from some other role. But who should be there rather than these political actors?
Should be people that improve the state of mankind, I would say. Now, who would that be?
Like Thomas Edison or someone like that?
From that point of view, Edison should be up there. Yeah, he should be. Cyrus McCormick, who invented the Reaper, should be up there. Henry Ford, mass production. should be up there. And of course, all these people have all kinds of other character flaws. But, you know,
Isn't this true of great men though in general, Doug? Like I mean, for and women, but great men, like you can't be a Puritan and be although I guess some of them did try to be that way, but it's almost like there's trade-offs. Like you and I know some people who are remarkable people who have great achievement, but they often have a foible, or two on the side, right? And
yeah,
don't we all?
yeah, yeah. We all do, of course. So, well, was Rushmore? I forget. Was it funded privately or paid for by the state?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I know that, or I think I know that the monument to Crazy Horse is paid for by private donations, because when we went in there, I think we paid $10 a person to go and look at it. And we just looked at it from the car, frankly. So that was $20. So that must be it. But I don't know how they did it with Rushmore.
Let's see. Looks like 85% of which of the money came from federal funds.
Well, that's a pity. So there's no way in hell Grover Cleveland was probably the most benign of all presidents, and therefore nobody even knows who he is or recognizes the name. No way he's ever going to get a monument in the Black Hills.
Right. No chance. But maybe we'll get an Obama one up there, and a Trump and a Biden. I mean, just the new men of the world that shaped the next century. And
yeah, that's right. Well, and that reminds me, I did an article for internationalman.com on the degradation of the American currency and coinage, and how it compares with the degradation of the currency and coinage in the Roman Empire. And just as in Rome during the Republic, nobody would dream, none of the consuls would have dreamed of putting their face on a coin. Julius Caesar was the first that did it. And then when the official emperor started with Augustus, the coins all had the emperor's visage on them. And in the US, the first, we always had, liberty or, an Indian or some type of
a symbol,
allegorical figure,
yeah,
on the coin, representing a virtue of some type. And it started appropriately, I guess, with Abraham Lincoln, who was in 1909 put on the penny. And then things were in abeyance. And then once Roosevelt got in office, this was predictable because Roosevelt was a horrible statist. Worst president we've ever had? Well, very possibly. Then, let's see, in 1932, he put Washington on a quarter, replacing Walking Liberty. Then a few years later, Jefferson was on the nickel, and, so, and then after Roosevelt died, only 2 years later, he was put on the dime, replacing Mercury. So
1909 was the first time.
Although I've got to point out that the first time a sitting president went on the currency was, again, appropriately in 1861. Lincoln, whether he pushed for it or I don't know what the facts in back of this were. I have to look into it. But Lincoln put himself on the $1 bill.
Wow.
So that's infamous. And of course, the same thing's happening with the currency. It was up until only after the Federal Reserve that we started putting dead presidents and so forth. And of course, Franklin and Hamilton, a horrible person, shouldn't be on the currency anyway, but they weren't presidents. But you shouldn't put these visages of political leaders on the coinage and currency.
How do you feel about Franklin?
Well, you've got to be a fan of Franklin because he was
Yeah.
an inventor. He was a real Renaissance man. But on the other hand, what was he doing at the Constitutional Convention in 1789? I should have been fighting against the Constitution. I mean,
He's one of the few people.
probably the best Constitution there is of countries that have constitutions. Okay, but they were there to tweak and refine the Articles of Confederation, not to. It was actually a palace coup, is what it was.
It was, and I mean, and he is a guy who had the moral authority to put a stop to it out of anyone there, you know.
Yeah, say, look, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to change a few things that experience has taught us, like the states were putting up duties between each other and so forth to keep them under control. I mean, people think states' rights are the answer to all these questions. No, they're not. I mean, they're exactly the same type of people in state government houses as you find in the Capitol. They just don't think as big. They're not as dangerous. It's funny, at Freedom Fest, Skousen had a fundraising party for this woman who's the governor of South Dakota. Everybody had to pay $500 to, well, he didn't even ask me to go to the party because he knew I wouldn't do it. And he knew that if I did, I would have been the skeleton at the feast.
Yeah.
But none of these people are any good. I mean, like, it seems like DeSantis is the best of a bad bunch, but the power will go to his head too if he goes to Washington.
I think so too. And you know, I also, you know, DeSantis is he was a man of the state in many ways. I mean, he's a Yale alum. He's not like a real big outsider, you know. He's and he also this law where they said there's no vaccine, you know, that there could not be a vaccine passport, you know, that they could not require checking for it. At the same time, though, there's, you know, in the law is referenced, and they could have eliminated this altogether, that the health authorities in Florida do have the legal right to force everyone to be vaccinated. So in the law, it says there can't be any vaccine passports, but it does say that everyone can be forced vaccinated. That's the bill he signed. Now, the headline didn't get spun that way, and no one actually reads the legislation, but that's what's there. And so I don't know if he's such a, yeah, you know, I think they're all problematic, I guess.
At a minimum, that's being very, very, very kind. Well, anyway, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So you're just
we don't have any influence over it. All we can do is try to insulate ourselves from the worst consequences of all this.
That's right. And we'll try and dig into how we can do that in future episodes. So we'll leave it there, I think, for today.
Tomorrow we can await questions and comments from our gentle listeners, and that'll be fun.
If you have questions for Doug, join our Telegram channel. There'll be a link in the description of this video. Join that channel, and there's a form in there where you can submit questions, and Doug and I will get through as many as we can tomorrow. So thanks a lot, Doug. We'll talk to you then.
See you then, Matt.